Hey everybody, welcome back to the homestead. Well, both of our in-ground gardens are completely planted. Our raised bed gardens are planted, and now we're moving on to finishing up our container gardening in the Crystalix tubs.
Yesterday we made a trip into the Springfield area and got another load of compost, organic compost. And last evening the girls helped us fill a bunch of Crystalix buckets so that early this morning I could do some planting.
We've been getting a lot of questions over the last week or so about how our gardens are coming along, how all of the seeds that we put in are doing. So we thought today we'd take a little break from some of our work, walk you guys around and show you how each of the different parts of the homestead are starting to grow and the hopes that we have for what kind of harvest we're going to have here in just a few months.
While we're over here by a lot of the containers that we just started, let's just start there. We'll just give you a brief overview of what we're planting and why. So this morning I was busy doing planting in some of these buckets here. Mostly I'm planting herbs in these buckets. We have also some tomatoes. Now, I had high hopes this summer of getting my dream herb garden going and into the ground, but things just didn't work out that way. Honestly, I was just really indecisive about where and how and the layout. So I thought I might as well just get my herbs started in buckets so they can start maturing, and then when I have the perfect plan, they'll be ready to go into the ground and already a good size. So I have lots of herbs that are already planted and more to go into buckets. Our plan all along for our cherry tomatoes has been to plant them in these buckets so that we can keep them closer to the house for easy snacking and easy harvesting. We've also been introduced to a couple new varieties of tomato plants from some of our friends. So we've decided also to do some planting of new varieties of tomatoes in these buckets. Just a few of the new varieties we're going to be trying this year are the Perone tomato, the hillbilly tomato, along with the large red cherry tomato. The herbs I have over here right now are anise hyssop, marshmallow, feverfew, bee balm, holy basil, St. John's wort, rosemary, creeping thyme, and lavender. Now, I'm not done yet. I have a bunch more to plant, but that's what I have over here so far. Let's go over on the other side. We have some buckets planted over there. Oh, and I forgot about this pepper plant. These are lunchbox peppers. They're more of like a sweet snacking pepper. We're excited to be able to have those out here. We can just grab them if we want to have some with some dip or in a salad. So we're excited to see what those are going to do this year. So we have a mixture of spring plants, which are totally done, and summer plants, which are just started. You can see that our kale and our lettuce are so done. I'll be ripping those out in just a day or so. We have 2 cherry tomato plant varieties that we planted here. One of them got totally hit by a tomato hornworm, so it's recovering. I have ashwagandha here, some carrots. We also think we have a possum that's getting up into these buckets and smashing some of the plants. So my other carrot bucket isn't doing really well. I've got 2 buckets of garlic that have been completely trampled, but we're gonna be working on that here shortly. I have parsley over here, some celery, walking onions, and then we have some brassicas down here, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, cabbage, and a little bit of broccoli. They're getting eaten by worms because we haven't been good about using the organic caterpillar control called BT. But pretty soon here, I'm going to be using some of that to get rid of those worms. Now, you guys watched us build and plant this raised bed garden full of potatoes. The potatoes are doing great. We're looking forward to a great harvest. This half of the potato garden, we planted whole potatoes, and the back half we planted pieces of potatoes. And you can see there is a small difference between the two. These plants in general are overall larger than the plants down here on the end. This is our first year really trying to get serious about growing potatoes because we use a lot of them and we want to be less dependent on the grocery store. So we built this raised bed for the potatoes. We've also planted 2 other raised beds full of potato plants. Let's go over there and take a look at how they're doing. You know what, before we go look at the other raised beds of potatoes, I do want to take you quickly through the greenhouse and show you how things are doing in our raised bed garden. And we do have more buckets in here that we've planted. It's getting too hot in the greenhouse, so the rest of the buckets we have in here need to be moved out within the next couple of days. But come on inside and take a look. So in the raised bed garden, we have the last of our spring vegetables. It is getting so hot in here that they are struggling a little bit, and within the next week we're going to be harvesting everything regardless of kind of how grown it is and use what we can. Overall, this did really well. We planted in here late because we just didn't have the greenhouse ready. So it is what it is, and we're happy with how things did under the circumstances. After we rip everything out and preserve what we can, we're going to be just putting some summer plants in here just as an experiment. You know, nothing that we absolutely need to count on to feed our family, but just to see how well things will do when it's so hot out. So I think we're going to put some tomato plants in here, maybe some sweet potatoes, and just see how they go. But our buckets here, they need to be moved out, but they're doing pretty well. I got chard, some cherry tomatoes, summer squash, some Russian kale. Now, summer squash is something that you guys have asked us about in the comments. Where is our zucchini? Where is our summer squash? Well, we've had such a problem in the last 2 years with squash bugs and cucumber beetles that we decided this year to only plant those in the buckets. So we have 3 buckets that have them in there right now, and I am going to be planting some more so that we have an early harvest and a little bit of a midsummer harvest. On the other side over there, we have more cherry tomatoes, more chard, more kale, and that's about it.
Now it's time to move on to some of the experimental gardens that we're doing this year. The first experiment is with 2 of our potato gardens and growing them with the woven ground cover. So basically what we did is we put down the woven ground cover over this raised bed garden, and then we planted our potato pieces just in the holes of the woven weed fabric. The plants themselves are doing great. You can see in both gardens the plants are just looking amazing. These are actually starting to flower. So, you know, time will tell how well they're doing underground and how many potatoes we'll get out of this, but it's definitely keeping the weeds out of here, which is great. I think when it gets time to harvest, what we'll have to do is basically cut the tops of the plants off and then peel the ground cover back, and then we'll be able to dig up our potatoes. So I'm excited to see when we get to that point how these did. The other experiment is with our onions. Let's walk over to that raised bed. This is the onion garden that we're trying this year. Now this is the first time that we're also trying the onions with the woven ground cover. Now, a little backstory on this garden. This thing was so overgrown with weeds that, to be honest, our plan for this year was to basically just demolish it, probably come through with the tiller and, you know, take the logs away and just basically till this area up and maybe build either some new raised beds or just plant in the ground in this area. But at the last minute, we decided to try these experiments with the potatoes and the onions along with the woven ground cover. Now, I think it's working better for the potatoes so far than the onions, but I think that's because of how overgrown this bed has become with weeds even before we put the ground cover down. So you can see we're still going to have to do quite a bit of weeding in here because it's growing up just right where the holes are melted in the plastic. So, and the type of weed that's growing here is just super invasive. At this point, after this season, we will be, you know, demolishing this and building a new raised bed here. But we're just going to see how these onions hold up for this year and see if we can get a decent harvest out of them.
Well, here we are in one of our big in-ground gardens. This garden has most of the vegetables that we will be growing for the next year. Lots of activity happening in here. We planted this about 10 days ago, and so a lot has happened in here since. We started out planting 5 rows of beans, and most of them have germinated. It looks like we will need to go back and fill in some of the empty spots. But we have a row of soybeans or edamame. We'll eat them fresh just once in a while as a treat. 2 rows of green beans and 2 rows of pinto beans. They're doing fantastic, and we can't wait for them to get even bigger and for us to start harvesting fresh beans.
Next up is our row of cucumbers and okra. We did this row in kind of a unique way where we separated our cucumbers because we're doing 2 different varieties. On this end of the row, these are called Marketmore cucumbers. They're kind of a classic slicing cucumber, and they're all doing really well. We do need to get out here and pull a few little weeds in these holes, but all of them look like they have germinated. And then in the middle, we have our okra. We're growing the Clemson Spineless. They by far are our favorite okra to eat. It looks like all but 3 of them came up, so we will have to replant those 3, but the other ones are all doing well. And then down at the other end is more cucumbers. These are called Dar Cucumbers, D-A-R. And they're a little bit shorter, stockier cucumber. They're great for pickling whole. And it looks like all but a couple of those have come up as well. We will replant the rest of those, but in general, we're really happy with the way everything in this row is doing.
Next up are the peppers. This year we have 1 row of peppers, a combination of sweet peppers and spicy peppers. So a total of 28 pepper plants here. It looks like we've lost 1, but it was one of our bell peppers. Half of this row is bell peppers, so losing 1 isn't that big of a deal, and I actually have 1 more plant that I can replace it with. They're looking fantastic, not a ton of growth yet, but most of the work that's happening is down under the ground. So any day now, I know they're just gonna shoot up and just turn into some lush, gorgeous pepper plants and provide us with some awesome peppers for the summer.
Next up is my absolute favorite part of the garden, the tomato rows. This year we're planting 3 full rows of tomatoes. Normally we only do 2, but Sarah just had a feeling that we should do an extra row this year, so we're doing an extra row of tomatoes. We've got 2 full rows of slicing tomatoes, which we'll use for fresh eating. We'll also use for canned diced tomatoes, stewed tomatoes, tomato juice, all of those types of things. And then we've got 1 full row of paste tomatoes. Those are used for all of our tomato sauce type products that we can. So in total, we got in the garden here about 90 tomato plants. And then along with the ones that we're planting in buckets, will be well over 100 tomato plants this year, which should give us plenty to eat fresh and a lot to put up for the winter as well. We also, at the end of this row, planted just a few Tomatillo plants. And you can see that those are doing well. They've actually already got blossoms on them, so we're excited about that. Be able to make some great green salsa out of the tomatillos. Everything around here is just looking amazing. The tomatoes really have about doubled in size already in the first 10 days that they've been in, and that is a good sign. We're really happy.
This row here is for our butternut type squash. They're not actually butternut, but they are going to taste like it and look a lot like it. We had some pretty good germination here. Looks like I'm going to need to replant less than 1/3 of them, but they look fantastic. They're great, lush green. A good size for only 10 days after planting. So just a little bit of work on a nice cool evening, hopefully tonight, and this will be completely replanted and ready to go.
These next 2 rows are where we've planted our sweet potato slips. They are doing amazing. Out of 60 plants that we put in, we've only lost 1. So it looks like it's going to be a great sweet potato year. Now what's funny is in the past we've actually planted regular potatoes back in this area as well, and it looks like there's actually 3 regular potato plants growing up here as well. So when we dig up our sweet potatoes, we'll also have other potatoes to dig up. Even though I tilled in here, those still came up from, must have been some seed potatoes left in the ground. So, but these are doing great. Sweet potatoes love the heat, so I would guess that as the summer goes on, these are just going to take off and probably cover this entire area. And then the final row of this garden is some sunflowers. We added those really just to add some color. We'll be able to harvest some maybe to eat and to give some to the animals. But for the most part, it was just kind of a fun thing to do at the back of the garden to get some color in the garden. The last garden that we have to show you today is the garden that we just planted a few days ago. It's our sweet corn and watermelon garden. We've gotten some really good questions from you guys about the watering system that we use and kind of how do we use it and how do we know it's watering effectively. So let's go take a look. We ran it this morning for about 2 hours, and because we don't have the weed fabric everywhere, you can really see what a good job it does. Let's go take a look. The type of system that we use is called drip tape irrigation. It's a drip system that lays on the ground and it puts out little drops of water. There's an emitter every 12 inches along your garden, and it waters very slowly, and you let it run for quite a long time, and it waters right at the ground level, and it waters nice and deep. Now, one of the questions that we've gotten quite a bit is it a big deal if there isn't an emitter by each one of your plants? No, it's not a big deal, because what you're going to do is you're going to run this long enough that it's going to water your entire row regardless of where the emitter is. So you can see on the rows that we planted here, we let this run again for about 2 hours this morning, and you can see even though there's only an emitter every 12 inches, that the entire row is now soaked with water. The water will just run and water the entire row. So these are the rows where we have our sweet corn planted. Again, they've only been in for about 4 days, so they're not up. But you can see that they're going to water the entire row so all of those seeds can germinate. Now, the reason I wanted to show you guys this is because most of the time we're using it on top of the woven weed fabric, and you can't really see what's happening underneath because it's just soaking in. This gives you a much better picture of what it looks like, so you know for sure that this is what's happening. It's watering your plants well, and you can use this. You know, the benefits of using this are that you're not doing over-the-top watering, and you're getting a nice deep soak. By not watering over the top, you're preventing a lot of those problems like powdery mildew and different blights, and this really just creates a much better environment for your plants. The reason we really like this system is because it waters nice and deeply. When you're out here, if you're watering, like say with a hand, a wand, you're probably not going to stand out here for 2 hours watering your garden to make sure everything is equally soaked and it's getting nice and deep. With a system like this, you can literally turn it on, go back in the house, move on with your day, do other chores. You can either hook it up to a timer or just set a timer so in a couple hours you turn it back off and it has done a beautiful job. So for us, that is a real time saver. Even though we're not planting, hundreds of acres of crops, we definitely have more stuff growing than what we could possibly water every day by hand. So we run this. We try to water our gardens 1 to 2 inches per week, which we figured out for our system, 1 inch is about 2 hours of run time. So depending on whether or not we're going to get rain that week, we might run it a little longer or not. We ran it this morning. Even though there's a chance we're going to get some rain today, I don't think we're going to get a lot. So we need to run it so that those seeds can germinate. Well, there you go. Those are the gardens that we have planted so far. We still have a few things that we're going to plant and a few things that we're going to replant, but for the most part, everything is in the ground and starting to do well. Now, I can't wait until we get past planting and into the eating and harvesting season, because really, let's face it, that's what gardening is all about.
So guys, make sure you stick around and stay tuned to see how everything grows up until harvest and then right through the harvesting, canning, and preserving season. Guys, make sure if you're not subscribed yet, you hit the subscribe button below so that you're notified when our new videos come out. And the best way that you can help us here on the homestead is to share our videos on all your social media. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.
God bless.